Hello, Abnormal Investigations. I've got another encounter for you. I hope everybody's doing all right today. It's still cold out. I'm ready for a little warm weather. We do have a break coming, thank God. It has been so cold. Going in and out feeding the animals from the cold to the heat, that can make it really hard on you also. All right, guys. We'll go ahead and jump into today's encounter. As always, I look forward to hearing from you guys in the chat. That's one of my favorite things. I have two paranormal-like stories. I'll just tell this one. However, there needs to be some context put in about myself before the story can begin. I live in New York State. I have my entire life, and this entire incident occurred shortly after my 20th birthday, about a week later to be exact. As I write this, I am rounding the corner of 31, and I have looked back on this incident many, many times. I am currently finishing up a degree in geoscience, and my thought process has always been analytical and method-based. So I have thought of every possible reason for what occurred, and even the most logical can't explain everything that I saw that day. Anyway, I grew up in a very abusive home. I was not close with my mother, stepfather, or sister, and it was for that reason that I grew very close with my maternal grandparents, who took me in, practically raised me. My grandfather was an extremely hard-working individual, holding down 3 full-time jobs at one point when he was raising my mother and 3 siblings. He was an Army vet that served during Vietnam, and one of the most loving people I had ever known. He never swore or raised his voice. He never had to. He commanded respect in a way rarely seen. He was the kind of man that even in retirement would wake up at 4 a.m., do yard work and household chores until late in the day, or even into the evening sometimes, never slowing down for anything except for his dinner and, of course, the occasional cup of coffee. Like I said earlier in this post, I am currently finishing up a degree. I went back to college during the pandemic, so at the time, I was kind of lost in an in-between state, having no idea what direction I wanted my life to go in. My friends were all off to college or the military, and I was kind of alone. For whatever reason, I had decided that I wanted to try and go hunting. I had never gone before, and quite frankly, I was bored, so I asked my grandfather if he would go with me. He was extremely hesitant, but eventually he said yes. I asked him why he was hesitant, and all he would tell me was, "I just don't want to go," or he would ignore the question. I decided that I should ask my grandmother, just in case hunting in the woods with rifles would be a problem due to his military service. When I brought it up, she just looked at me and said, "If he said he would go, that means he'll go. Don't question it. But if he tells you to do something while you're out there, don't hesitate to do that either." Now, neither of my grandparents had a cold bone in their body, but both of them were rather cold towards me about this inquiry into going hunting. I was weird. I ended up just shoving it off and waiting for my grandfather to give me a call for the weekend, which would be in mid-August. He took me up north near an old camp his friends owned, about 2.5-hour drive from where we located. We had a great time driving up there. We laughed and joked around like normal, nothing out of the ordinary, that is, until we were about 20 minutes from our site. He suddenly got very, very quiet, and his entire demeanor changed. He was very tense, almost angry, agitated, something I chalked up to some maybe PTSD or maybe a slight flashback. Well, shortly after I noticed a change, he began to pull the truck over, and he stopped. I looked over at him, and my heart stopped. He was staring right at me with an almost insane look in his eyes. And then he spoke very slowly and very methodically. He said, "When we get there, you must promise me to do whatever I say when I say it. Do not question me. Do not hesitate. Just do it." When I began to speak, and he cut me off and practically yelled, "Swear to me that you will listen." Remember, my grandfather had never spoken to me or anyone like that. I had never saw or was very taken back by what I had just seen and witnessed. He put the truck back into gear and kept driving. About 15 minutes later, we pulled up and we got out. My grandpa seemed normal at this point. He was cracking jokes and making small talk, and we took off into the woods, ready to hunt. Hours went by, and we saw and heard plenty of small animals and birds, but no big game, probably because we were being far too loud. We arrived at this site relatively early, maybe 8 a.m. By the time we made the decision that we would head back, it was almost 7 p.m. It was truly a great day for the most part. Sure, I didn't actually hunt, but spending the day in the woods with the man who raised me was fun and relaxing. That is, until we came into a clearing, a small clearing that you could probably park 3 or 4 cars in, next to each other. My grandfather slowed down and put his arm out for me to stop, so I did. He lowered his gun and sort of hunched over and began sniffing the air, literally sniffing the air. I had no idea what he was doing, but this was extremely odd. He took a few steps toward the forward motion of us, so I was standing a ways behind him. And that's when his entire story truly begins. He slowly turns around and looks at me. His teeth were bared, and he was breathing heavy. His eyes were wide, and his pupils were huge, and he was looking at me, and he says in a deep, guttural voice, I'll repeat that, a deep, guttural voice, "Run back to the truck now." I just stood there confused. I didn't move at all. At this point, he had turned back around. His hands were held out almost like a claw-like gesture. He had dropped his gun altogether, and he screams at me while facing away from me, "I told you to run." This time, I turned right around and I booked it. I had never ran that fast in my life. I tripped several times and cut my knee badly. It took me a while to get back to the truck, but when I did, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I threw myself into the passenger seat and slammed the door and waited. At that time, my grandfather, who was 70 years old, he was in great shape for his age, but he definitely couldn't move as fast as me. So I figured it would take him a while for him to get back to the truck. At this point, I felt horribly guilty for leaving my grandfather out there, so I went to open the door and go back for him. And that's when I heard it. A loud, high-pitched screeching. It sounded so alien, so unnatural. And that's when I saw my grandfather absolutely booking it out of the woods, and I mean freaking sprinting, charging through the underbrush like it wasn't even there. He charged around the truck to the driver's side and got in. When I looked at him, he was bruised up and bleeding. He was still baring his teeth like an agitated animal, and breathing heavy. He almost seemed bigger, too. Like, I don't know how to explain it. More muscular, maybe? Or maybe it was just adrenaline. Less like an old man and more like a younger, stronger version of himself. Maybe it was the adrenaline. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. It was so strange, Mike. I can't explain it. But before I could ask what the heck was happening, he threw it into reverse and sped out of there. He refused to talk to me for the entire ride home. When we pulled into the garage, he waited for the garage door to shut, and he looked at me completely exhausted. I just shook my head at him and said, "What the F?" He said, and this is a direct quote, "There are things out there that people are not aware of, things that exist most in only legends and stories. And all legends have some basis in fact." He then gave me a weak but warm smile, patted my shoulder, and said, "Don't ask me to take you hunting again, boy. I'm too old. And don't you tell your grandma what happened today," with a weird smile. And that was it. I have never told anyone about this story before, not even my wife. I'm sharing it here to get it off my chest and to get some other people's opinions on what do you think happened that day. Well, I'm not sure. It kind of, parts of your encounter kind of, to me, suggests that it was your grandpa was the creature. And then kind of parts of your story kind of suggested to me that there was something out there. Maybe your grandpa was just agitated and knew what was coming. I'm not sure. I would like to hear more. Maybe you could touch up a little bit more at what you think. Or maybe you don't know. Maybe that's why you're asking. But I could see the story going two different ways. I'm not real sure. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you all think. Was his grandpa the creature, or was there something out there his grandpa knew was out there and he was just trying to save him? Let me know in the comments what you think about this one. I really enjoyed it. It was very interesting. And until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner. And we'll for sure see you on the next one.